I've had this particular photo in mind, or at least one similar to it, ever since I got my ND filter, my 10-stop ND filter in December of 2020, I think it was. This is the fountain in front of the Edmund Lowe Library on the Oklahoma State University campus, and I've titled the photo 1890 because that's the year that's in the foreground on the ground there. And there's a couple things that made this kind of difficult to shoot. Number one, this fountain is not always on, and I discovered that pretty quickly. So I remember bringing my ND filter to campus shortly after I got it and setting out to take a picture of this fountain, and no dice. The fountain was not turned on, which makes sense because if they turn this on in the winter, then you get freezing water in the pipes on a cold night, and it just doesn't work. So they have to wait till the weather is consistently warm to have this fountain on. And that didn't happen until I think April is when they finally decided to turn this thing on. So I had to wait quite a while to get this photo. But I also wanted to take it when there wasn't a lot of people around, and that's a bit of a challenge because on a nice sunny day like this, you're almost always going to find people around. Now, thankfully, with a 10-stop ND filter, you're probably not going to see people in the frame if they are moving, and that actually happened here. There was a couple people who were walking through the picture in the background that didn't actually show up in this photo because with that long of an exposure on that much of an ND filter, that person would have to hold really still to actually show up. So that did help eliminate some of the people in the background. But there was another element of this that I really did pay attention to. Well, there was two things. Number one, the lighting. Now, this is completely intentional, the fact that this is lit how it is. From my office, I can see some light poles and trees and other things like that. And I waited not until high noon, but I waited until the sun was as far overhead as it would be without going to the left or right. Basically, I waited until the shadows would be coming straight back, or until the sun was directly behind this fountain. And as soon as I got to that point, by looking at the light poles out my window at work, I went over to Lowe Library and I got this shot. I wanted it to be evenly lit, where the sun was neither on the left nor on the right. And it worked. It's backlit, and the shadow below this fountain is almost perfectly in line with the fountain itself. It's not to the left or right. And then the fountain itself has this nice glow to it. It's I don't know, it's kind of a neat look, I think, and it is entirely intentional that it looks just like this. But the other thing that I didn't really plan on, that I'm not sure if I like it or not, is the way the fountain is just like this single pillar of white water. It's not actually that interesting. It'd be nice if it was like a giant arc or some bows of water like out at Theta Pond. In this case, it's not. It's kind of boring to look at. Now, there was a couple photos that I shot where it was windy. There was some gusts of wind that came through, and you could see the water kind of going off to the left a little bit. And I almost chose one of those for my Weekly 50 photo, but I decided I didn't really like it as much because even though this is kind of boring, it does have a nice sense of symmetry to it. And I appreciated that more than seeing the water blow around a little bit. It might not be the most compelling photo, but I thought it was the most visually pleasing photo. Now, the one thing that did not turn out how I wanted it to was the background. If you look, this is not perfectly lined up with the formal gardens in the background. I should have shifted myself just a bit to the right, and I'm off center just enough to be bothersome to me. I wish I had just scooted over, 3 inches. I think it would have lined up a little more perfectly. I did line myself up intentionally with one of the seams on the pavement, but it turns out that particular seam was not really in the center of the frame. So I should have paid a little more attention to where I was standing to get this photo framed just how I wanted it. As it turns out, this is like 95% of the photo that I wanted, and hopefully I'll be able to go back and get the actual photo that I wanted. One other thing, though, I shot this with my D750 and my 50mm lens, and I knew that it wasn't going to be a super wide field of view, but I was surprised at how constrained the field of view was, even going into this, even knowing my 50mm lens, knowing my camera. I was hoping it would be just a little wider. And I didn't really have much more room to back up. I was against the steps of the library behind me. So Maybe I'll go back with another camera and a different ND filter. I don't know. The only wider lens I have with an ND filter is my Fuji, and that's a 3-stop filter on that. So I don't know. I'll have to think about it. I think it would be cool to take this photo with a much wider lens and like a 10-stop ND filter, but that still leaves the fountain, or the problem of the fountain. Would it still look like this, or would it be more of a grand arc? I don't think so. I think it would probably look like this. So anyway, I enjoy taking this, but it also gives me a lot of things to think about for what I might do in the future for a similar photo.